Hello everyone, BoRXAlmighty here, and I know it's been a long time since I've been active, but Arena's back, and so am I. In previous versions, I've tier listed the augments, and this time we have the most variety ever. Now I won't be covering every single one, because if you'd like to see my thoughts on each one, feel free to check out this video here, and every augment is timestamped for your convenience. That being said, in version 4 of Arena, we have 63 total silver augments. Now there are 50 new augments, but let's first start off with the two that have been completely taken out. The first being Virtuous Cycle, which was kind of like a Moonstone effect where your heals would lead to shields and your shields would lead to heals. Not the most exciting one, and I'm not going to miss it. Now the second one that's been taken out is fully automated, but it's not completely out of the game as it's now being replaced by the item Lightning Rod, which is a nice way to still see the augment without having to pick it as a choice, and it is still quite fun and strong, especially considering that there's now so many more auto cast augments in the game. Now 2 augments have actually left this tier list and have been upgraded to gold, and the first one is Vulnerability, which I agree was very, very strong for a silver augment, and now that it's moved to a gold augment, it actually has lost a little bit of its damage. It lost 5% of its damage, but it's gained 5% of its crit chance, and I do think that it was a good decision to move Vulnerability to a gold augment. The other augment that moved to gold was Flashy, and it's pretty much the same, except that it's actually a nerfed version of it from what I can understand. It now has the same 3 flashes, but each flash now has a 3-second cooldown, so weaker than the 2-second cooldown it used to be. Now, in my tier list, I did agree that it was strong, but I felt it was pretty specific, as only certain characters could use it. But I guess in those use cases, it was too strong in the eyes of Riot. If somebody just keeps on flashing on you and absolutely decimating you, or constantly flashing and escaping, I could understand it being too powerful. And for that reason, Flashy is now a gold augment. Now we can talk about 2 augments that got downgraded, the first being Cannon Fodder. And honestly, I agree with the downgrade because I rate it as one of the worst gold augments, and now that it's a silver augment, I can happily rate it as one of the worst silver augments. I've only seen this in one of my games in the new version of Arena, and it just doesn't really do much. You use it at the beginning, and then you just don't have a silver augment anymore. Sure, maybe it could be good if, like, you're a Kennen and you need to get on top of somebody and use your good ult, but at the same time, you kind of just know they're coming because you see the little mark. I just feel like there's so many other augments that would be better than Cannon Fodder. Now, the best use case that I've seen for Cannon Fodder is when I took it when my teammate had Raid Boss, because if you're a squishy champion, you can kind of just hide in the cannon, and the enemy champions can look for you and wonder where you are, and maybe they just completely forget about the person being Raid Boss at the moment. So it's a good way to kind of hide in that one use case, but besides that, it is just not a great augment. But hey, maybe it's still a funny one to pick. Kind of like old Battle Sled, which is now, of course, completely gone. Now, the other augment that got downgraded from gold to silver was another one that I rated at very, very low levels, which was Dive Bomber, and it's still completely the same from its gold version. And honestly, as a silver augment, I do think it can be strong but specific. Like, if you are in one of those close, scrappy fights, I have won a couple of rounds thanks to Dive Bomber, so just because there are some use cases where Dive Bomber can actually win you a round, it's not the worst augment in the world, especially because it's not just your death that counts, it could also be your teammates, so there is some playability around that. It's a bit versatile in that regard. It's definitely not the best augment, because if the enemy champions are just ranged and kill you from afar, then it does absolutely nothing. But a lot of the fights I've been in are getting scrappy. More people are realizing that you can wait. You don't just have to immediately run in. You can wait for the zone. And in those cases, Dive Bomber is just better in general. Especially now that it's a silver augment, I do think it's clickable sometimes. Now we're getting into the new augments. Well, technically Desecrator is coming back from when it first came out. It then got deleted, but now it's back. And Desecrator, what that does is when you immobilize an enemy champion, you generate 5 curse stacks and deal bonus true damage equal to the number of them you have generated in the current round. And the way they try to balance the curse augments, all of them, is you can generate a max number of curse, which is 30 plus 10 times the number of curse augments equipped. So if you have 1, I believe that means you can get 40 curse, would make sense to me. And if you have 2, that means you can get up to 50 curse per round. You keep the curse stacks per round over and over again, which is nice. Now, what you also get is you permanently gain bonus armor and bonus magic resistance equal to 20% of all curse stacks generated, which is kind of nice. The main problem is that you have to constantly be immobilizing people in order to get these stacks. So in order to get the full 40 stacks, you need to immobilize people 8 times in a round. So if you only have about 1 CC ability, that could be more difficult because you have to land that 8 times in order to get the max stacks. If you have 2, it's a little bit easier. If you have 3, like Nautilus, for instance, with his ultimate, I guess, that would be a little bit better. I actually don't really know how it works if you mobilize 2 people at once. If, like, Gragas E, for instance, if you hit both people, hopefully it gives you 2 stacks. Pretty much what I've found from the curse generating ones is that it is quite hard to actually get the stacks. Some rounds you will only end up getting 1 or 2, and that just ends up being very little bonus armor and bonus magic resistance. For all these reasons, I'm going to put Desecrator in strong but specific. Sure, if you're able to get all of the stacks every single round, it's really great. But unless you're playing a champion with a ton of CC, that can be quite difficult. The only reason why it is even in strong but specific is because if you have other curse augments, then it is better in that specific case because you just get more per round. And if you already have curses from before, then you'll immediately get that bonus armor and bonus magic resistance. So that's something to keep in mind if you already have a bunch of curse. But at the same time, a lot of the curse augments in general just feel a little underwhelming. It's kind of seems like something that if you high roll and get a bunch of curse augments, them just all stacking up together is really good. But if that's not the case, then it is a little bit lackluster, and oftentimes you'll find yourself frustrated that you just have an augment that gives you like 10 armor and magic resistance after a couple of rounds. Now the next augment we have is our first brand new augment, and it is Fire Sale, where upon selecting this augment, all of your items are sold at the shop for 100% of their gold value. So starter items and boots will be sold for 500, legendary items will be sold for 2,500, and prismatic items will be sold for 4,000. Now this doesn't sell any of your quest items, which is quite nice. And this augment is good if you bought a lot of item anvils during the game, because the item anvils costs 2,000, so when you're selling it, you're getting a profit of 500. Now, if you bought a prismatic item, you can only buy that through anvils, so selling them for 4,000 is not as great. This is a pretty good augment if there's some kind of special bonus during the game where you might have gotten some prismatic items, or like, for instance, it's a rel round where the prismatic anvils cost 3,000, because then if you take Fire Sale, you're gaining a 1,000 gold profit. The things that I don't like about Fire Sale is oftentimes when you're buying items, you're buying them for a purpose. So it's kind of like a, oops, I messed up my build, time to pick Fire Sale and redo everything that I've done. So if you really like the items you have, Fire Sale sucks. If you hate the items you got because of bad RNG, then Fire Sale can be alright. In that case, I'm going to put it in strong but specific. It's good, again, if you have certain rounds where you are getting items cheaper, like specifically anvils cheaper, then Fire Sale is better. But even in that case, it's not the absolute best, because realistically, all you're getting is maybe like 1 more item in the mid game, because during the late game, everybody just has a lot of items. In general, like usually your full build. Fire Sale is also good if you want to, for instance, try out an anvil strategy randomly in the middle of the game. You could sell all of your items. You could buy like a bunch of sad anvils, which could be okay, but again, not one of my favorite play styles, but it can be strong in these very specific scenarios. Besides that, it's pretty much something you're never going to click. Next up, we have Firefox, which allows you to automatically cast Ari's W, which is Foxfire, which gives you 40% bonus movement speed that decays over 2 seconds, and conjures 3 flames that orbit you clockwise for up to 2.5 seconds at a radius of 150 units. The flames will fly towards the nearest visible enemy champion within a certain distance and deal a certain amount of damage. The problem with Firefox and a lot of the auto cast augments is that sometimes they'll just cast at terrible times where they won't do anything at all. And even when they do anything, the best part about it is honestly just, in my opinion, the bonus movement speed. So if you're a champion that likes to kite a lot, then Firefox is alright. The damage itself, because it's all like flat damage and everybody's just super duper tanky in Arena because of the Arena stat adjustments, the damage does feel rather lackluster from everything that I've seen about Firefox. Now, if you have Lightning Rod, where all of your auto-cast augments just have lower cooldown, then sure, Firefox could be a lot better. But outside of that scenario, I'm going to put it in useless or niche okay, just because I believe a lot of other silver augments will just simply do better things for you. And the highs from Firefox are just not that high from what I've seen. Next up, we actually have what I believe is another downgraded augment, which is Fruits of Your Labor, which increases the effects of Power Flowers by 25%, and additionally, hitting a Power Flower now grants its effects to your ally if they are within 700 units of you, sharing the effects with them, and also granting you both 40% bonus movement speed for 2 seconds. So already, Fruits of Your Labor could be seen as a Firefox when you hit those Power Flowers. Now, this augment, it's kind of hard to rate. I think the best part about it is that it gives you more ulti CD reduction. So if you're hitting the Power Flowers, you get more cooldown reduction, and with Fruits of Your Labor, you're even getting more of that. So if you're a champion that really relies on your ultimate ability and you're able to like get in there, use your ultimate, get out, hit some Power Flowers, get your ultimate back, that can be quite good. I'm going to put it in the okay early, meh late category, because oftentimes in the early game, this can be a lot better because you and your teammate are fighting around Power Flowers, so that 700 unit distance is actually quite good, and I can imagine you winning some rounds because of you cheesing with Fruits of Your Labor. But in the late game, usually if you don't kill people with like your first ultimate rotation, it's very doubtful that you're a champion that then will use Fruits of Your Labor to get your ultimate back in order to then win the fight. Like, for instance, if the people that usually will be alive to use Power Flowers in the late game are going to be, like, tank champions. So if you're, like, a Maokai, you getting the increased Power Flowers isn't really going to do much. Sure, you're going to heal more, but you getting, like, your ultimate back isn't really going to save you unless you have other conditions, which will just win you the fight anyways. So it's an okay augment, but it's not something that I've ever seen really pop off. Next up, we have Juice Press, where all juices in you and your teammates' shops cost 50% less, so they'll now cost 250 gold, and they'll grant additional effects. If you buy hats, you get 2 more hats. It's not that impressive, unless you have one of the hat-related augments, which we might talk about in other videos. Then you have the Juice of Haste, where when you buy the cooldown reduction juice, you will then also get 20% bonus movement speed for the whole round, which is pretty good. You get the Juice of Power, which when you buy the one that gives you AD and AP, it also will give you armor penetration and magic penetration, which is like kind of like an augment like erosion, or the gold augment that gives you armor pen and magic pen. And then the Juice of Vitality gives you 25% heal and shield power, which if you do heal and shield a lot is a fair amount. Honestly, taking Juice Press is kind of a feels bad because you'd rather be buying perma stats instead of stats for the round. But if you think about it, the juices are very, very powerful. Like, for instance, Juice of Vitality gives you 300 flat health and then an extra 10% max health. Juice of Power gives you 10% AD, 10% AP, as well as a flat amount. Juice of Haste gives you plus 50% ability haste. And for all these reasons, I'm going to put Juice Press in weaker early, OP late. You really should be buying juices in the late game. I know a lot of people aren't, but the fact that it's cheaper for you and your teammate makes it a lot less painful to do so. It honestly encourages you to buy something that is very, very strong. And then on top of that, it gives you extra bonuses, which are quite nice in the bonus movement speed, the bonus armor pen, magic pen, the bonus heal and shield power, which alone are equivalent to several other augments that already exist in the silver tier. So for all these reasons, I think it is a very underrated augment. I don't think a lot of people take it. It's, again, kind of a feels bad to take. But the fact that it also boosts your teammate, it is quite nice if you don't have any other better alternatives that will like clearly win you the game. I think Juice Press could be just a solid choice to take in a lot of scenarios. That being said, it is quite weaker early game because you're not going to be taking juices quite often, especially like in the first round. I think it's almost impossible to take a juice if you want to start an item. But if you do get that first kill, you could do the second round with a juice, and maybe that will help you snowball the entire game off of just this one silver augment if you're able to win using the extra bonuses from this augment, because each kill gives you 250 gold, which means you and your teammate can always buy a juice every single round. Next up, we have Leg Day, which gives you 50 bonus movement speed and 40% slow resist. And honestly, this is just an augment that I'm happy to have. It's nothing too exciting. This augment is going to be better the better you are at the game, because movement speed is definitely like a stat that I think is a little bit more skill based, because if you're really good at kiting, then extra movement speed is going to help you kite better. This augment does suck if the enemies just have a bunch of dashes and flashes, which League of Legends is kind of steering more and more towards. That's why it's not going to be any higher on this list. It's not one that I'm like super thrilled to have. It's always going to do something in the rounds. It's going to help you kite. It's going to prevent you from getting kited a little bit. It's not something that's going to necessarily help you like stomp if your champion is bad, but if your champion is already a pretty solid one, or if you have other good things going for you, then Leg Day can be a pretty solid boost to help your already strong build. It's not going to be a strong build on its own. Next up, we have Numb to Pain, which gives you Death Stance Ignore Pain passive. And what that is that it reduces the damage that you're taking, 30% if you're melee, 50% if you're range, and instead stores it as true damage over 6 seconds, and you are going to be taking the damage over time. So it helps you from like getting bursted, for instance, because instead of immediately taking all the damage, you're going to take it over time. And honestly, I have very rarely seen this augment, and just the fact that nobody really builds Death Stance anymore, even though you could always do it, makes me feel like this augment is something that belongs in the if I have to tier. It's decent. I mean, it does something always, but it doesn't help you do any damage. It just helps you survive a little bit. So like if you're 1v2ing people, you're just going to die anyways. You might just take a little bit longer to die. If you're ranged, then it only does the 15%, which is half, which is a lot worse. So if you have a lot of sustain, I could see this being good, but there are just a lot better sustain augments, I feel, than Numb to Pain. And if you really, really want this effect, then you could just build Death Stance and take a different augment. But again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Numb to Pain is absolutely broken. But then again, if it is, I'm just going to start building Death Stance if I don't high roll into Numb to Pain, so I don't even really know how broken this could be. Next up, we have Overflow, where your abilities' mana costs are doubled, but you also deal 10% plus 0.5% per 100 maximum mana increased damage. And all champions, I believe, have more mana in Arena with the Arena stat adjustments. It's been a while actually since I've hovered over it. It might just be more mana regen. No, I think everybody has more mana. Yeah, as you can see, all champions gain 250 bonus mana. So anything that scales with mana is going to be a little bit better than if it was on Summoner's Rift. And just the fact that you're doing 10% increased damage is very solid. I'm going to put this in the weaker early, OP late category, because yes, you're going to be doing a lot more damage, but unless you're one-shotting people, then you will actually end up running out of mana in a lot of cases, especially in the early game. So this could be actually like a direct nerf in the early game, just because you will find yourself being completely But if you're going for a one-shot style of build where you just need like one rotation to absolutely blow up your opponents, then Overflow is absolutely bonkers. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in the top of this category, just because unlike a lot of these other things, you don't really need anything else to make it shine, and you can then even go into like mana builds to make your Overflow even stronger. But if you don't choose to do that, you always will just have 10% increased damage at the bare minimum. Next up, we have Parasitic Mutation, where you copy a random augment from either champion on the enemy team when the combat phase starts, with a copied augment changing every round. This augment is kind of funny because if you copy somebody else's on their enemy's team silver augment, you're going to be pretty sad. But let's say there's a bunch of like prismatic augments out there, then you could randomly hit one of their prismatic augments with this silver augment, which could be really good. This augment is going to be a lot better if your champion is somebody who can use a wide variety of augments, because you are copying an augment from the enemy team, so it's truly kind of random what you're hitting. You can kind of plan ahead and look what teams are alive and see if their augments would work well on you, in which case Parasitic Mutation would be stronger and stronger. I'm going to put it in the strong but specific tier. right about here, just because I could see some scenarios where you are kind of down an augment. If you end up getting one that is actually negative towards you, you can end up getting one that actively hurts you if you're not careful. Like, for instance, if you got Overflow and you're like just a straight tank, then you don't really care about doing more increased damage. You'll just actually run out of mana. So there are some scenarios where you could get screwed. I'm actually going to put on the top of this tier, just because you could get lucky, like I've said, and get a random prismatic augment from a silver augment, which is quite good in most scenarios. Like, there's very few prismatic augments that are actively going to hurt you, considering that you are replacing that silver augment. But you are playing this random chance where you could instead just get a silver augment that always does good things for you. If you take Parasitic Mutation first, and then the rest of the augments the game are all silver, then you're just mutating into a random silver augment when you could have taken a specific good one for you. Now we have an augment that I'm a bit conflicted with, which is Slime Time, which, like Ahri, gives you a different champion's ability. In this case, you're getting Zack's passive, which is Unstable Matter, where you release a burst of slime that does damage. Now, compared to Ahri's damage, this does do target maximum health percent damage, which is just better in general in Arena, because you want to be doing percent health damage as much as possible, just because everybody has way more health in general. Also, if you hit a champion, you secrete a slime blob towards a nearby location, and you have the chance of interacting with it by like mousing over it to consume it to heal yourself for percent of your maximum health, which is decent. Now, in Zack's case, it's really, really good because you're getting it on all of your abilities, while in this case, you're only getting it every 7 seconds. And in that case, it's kind of lackluster. You might just accidentally Unstable Matter randomly when there's nobody around, which then does really suck. If you're in a fight where you're both just clumped up, melee range, and you're just hitting each other, Slime Time is pretty good. If you're getting kited, Slime Time just does absolutely nothing the entire round. For these reasons, I'm going to put it in strong but specific. You do want to try to play around the zone shrinking when you have Slime Time, but even then, it's not that great of an augment. I'm actually going to put in okay early, meh late. I just have never really seen this augment do too well. Now that I'm thinking about it more, from somebody who plays a fair amount of Zack, just the fact that you get so many of these procs from all of your abilities is just a lot better, and it's also more controlled. You like know when you're getting them. With this one, you can just simply miss with Slime Time and get absolutely nothing. So there's just so many downsides, which makes Slime Time not that amazing. Next up, we have the most simple augment in stats, where upon selecting the augment, you gain 2 stat bonus anvils for free. It's kind of just a fine augment. It gives you like perhaps a little bit of armor and MR. It perhaps gives you a little bit of AP, AD. The one thing I don't like about stats is it just gives you a flat number, while a lot of the other augments are like scaling, like percentages are good. Like, for instance, AD, APT, and Escape and Escapade, they give you 10% AP or something like that, or like 15% AD, which just feels a little bit better. I'm gonna put stats in the if I have to tier. The one thing that's nice about stats is you can pretty much shake it on every single champion, which is really nice. So don't get me wrong, if you're in a pinch, definitely take stats. I just don't think it's really going to change the outcome of the game in a lot of scenarios, unless of course you super duper high roll your shards, which could happen. But in that case, you just got really lucky. You should also just get stat bonuses that don't really do much for you. Now, that being said, if you're playing like the stat anvil strat, then probably stats is really good for you. It's not a strat I play often because I just like the items in general, so I'm not really sure about that. But in that case, sure, stats for those people, absolutely love it. For the rest of us, solid augment, but nothing to really write home about. Now, quick note, I'll just say, I don't really remember if Symbiotic Mutation is a silver or gold augment. This list has the picture as gold, but listed it as silver. What this is, it's very similar to Parasitic Mutation, where you steal an augment from the enemy team. In this case, Symbiotic Mutation, you steal an augment from your ally, which is a lot better because you can start up to see what augments they have, and you can see if they're beneficial for you. So that's something I will talk about in the gold video, like where I'm going to place it. if it was on the silver one, then it would definitely be in the strong but specific tier, maybe even in the like OP tier in certain scenarios. If you're like both playing champions that are very similar that do want augments that are like the same, and in those cases you could maybe get like a prismatic augment that's really, really good for you. So in those cases, Symbiotic Mutation, absolutely amazing. If you're playing like kind of the same style of champion, absolutely amazing. I do think it is a silver augment, so in that case I'll put it in borderline Omega OP. It's like could go anywhere because again it's pretty much like any augment and it's just like any scenario. So this one you take if your teammate has really good augments for you, which is going to more likely happen if you're playing the same style of champion. So either this one is going to be really, really good for you or pretty much really bad for you because you don't want tank augments if you're playing like a carry. Next up we have Trailblazer, which is very similar to Tormentor, but instead of immobilizing champions, you need to be dashing or blinking in order to cause the enemy to take a burn, which will then deal them magic damage every second equal to 0.8% of the target's maximum health over the duration, and this burn stacks infinitely and refreshes with each application. The same cast instance cannot trigger this effect more than once every 1.5 seconds, so if you have like a billion dashes, you can't stack it really fast. Honestly, Trailblazer, kind of super niche or self-nerf. I haven't really found a lot of use cases for this. I'm gonna put it at the top of super niche or self-nerf. I think the problem with Trailblazer is you might try to play around it, but if you are a champion with a bunch of dashes or blinks, like you usually want to use those dashes or blinks strategically, so you're not really thinking about Trailblazer damage, and usually you're like doing other things. The 0.8% of the target's maximum health is a lot less than you think, especially because it's over 5 seconds, and it's gonna take you a while until it actually becomes anything meaningful. So very rarely you're gonna see somebody taking Trailblazer and pop off in your games. I haven't really seen it yet in any of my games, so not something I'm too excited for. Next up we have Transmute Gold, which is a great augment if you enjoy taking risks, which is something I like to do, so I'm gonna put it in that top of happy to have. This augment could almost win you the game or almost lose you the game, because if you get a gold augment that you can really, really use really well while everybody else has silver augments, that's pretty amazing. That being said, gold augments aren't that much better than silver augments in the most case. I mean, there's a few, like if you get the top tier gold augments that you can use, you're going to absolutely pop off. Like the one that gives you AP every time you deal damage. I'm so bad at names, but you probably know just from me saying that. So yeah, or you could just get an absolutely useless gold augment. So this one I like taking a lot. I am somebody who likes taking risks, so big fan of it. The only reason I'm not putting it any higher is because sometimes like a silver augment that you can specifically pick will just be better on average than your Transmute Gold. But hey, if you're not playing Arena to high roll, then what are you playing Arena for? Now we've covered all of the new Arena augments, but there are some that I want to change from the last time I made this tier list. The first I'm going to do is actually Infernal Soul. I'll move to the top of happy to have. I just see this one doing a lot of damage. It could honestly go up to OP. The only thing is like a lot of the ones in OP just are able to win you games a little bit harder than Infernal Soul. That being said, I do think it is really, really strong, especially in the early game, and it doesn't do too badly in the late game, and I am quite a fan of it. Another augment that I'm going to actually move up is Serve Beyond Death. I'm going to put it at the top of strong but specific. This one gives you an effect that's similar to Renata, and the amount of times this has actually helped me win a round when I shouldn't have been able to, or catches people off guard because they don't expect me to have something like this. And if you're able to just pump out that little bit extra bit of damage because you did get that kind of revive effect, we're still able to hit people, and then you are able to no longer end up dying because you got the revive, then Serve Beyond Death is very good. It still sucks if you're like getting killed from far away by like a lot of range, then it doesn't really do much. But in those like close, scrappy fights, Serve Beyond Death is quite well underrated from what I originally rated. One I'm going to put down a little bit is Tormentor, because similar to Trailblazer, the damage on it is a little bit lackluster. It's only really good in the like super late game scenarios where you have a tank versus tank matchup, then Tormentor damage will really stack up. But tanks right now do quite a lot of damage on their own thanks to like Sunfire. I think right now is just like absolutely bonkers. So, and like Heartsteel and all these other things, like tanks can do a ton of damage where you don't really need Tormentor in the long run. And if you are relying on Tormentor damage, you're probably just going to end up dying quicker because the enemies are going to blow you up. So I still think it can be strong in specific scenarios, but oftentimes it'll be a little bit underwhelming compared to where I had it initially rated. Now that's everything I have to say about the silver augments. Now there are so many augments and these are all my opinions, so I definitely could be missing out on things, so feel free to let me know, especially because I didn't meticulously go over every single augment once again. And if you do want to see my opinions on certain augments, feel free to check out my older video where again I do have timestamps for every single augment. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more arena tier lists. Next, I'll be working on the gold augment tier list, which should be coming out shortly. And I'm looking forward to making more videos soon. Thank you once again for watching, and best of luck on your own arena adventures.